Be like the Truman Show, but the boring parts. All right, and now we. Well, this is my. Oh shoot! Why did I click that? Hold on. Okay, this is scary. That's right. That's how. That's. I try to think of life. I try to think of life like that. I'm cool with everybody thinking about it that way, except for my surgeon. Um, Here we go. Fortunately, he seemed to take a different approach to life. So okay, here we go, and I think we're live. We were probably live. We've probably been live, but let's see. So okay, so people we've probably been on air, and we're excited to be here. We've got so we've got indie comic creators here, which I think are the most exciting types of comic creators right now, doing things that you can't see just anywhere else. And so, and Bert, you've been here before, but why don't you introduce yourself again and tell people a little bit about your story, and then at the appropriate moment, bring Jorge in. Bert G. And I'll just say, we're not doing the art really full justice. With they don't, you can't see just how great it is here. I'll try to zoom in a little bit, but it is really fantastic art. And what we'll do, we'll get into some of the full color pages too. So if you stick around, you'll get to see the full breadth of Jorge's talent, and of course, we'll get him to share his Instagram and everything too. But Jorge, can you tell us a little bit more about you and your artistic journey and how you got to be so good at doing this? Yeah, Bert, I think maybe that now is a good time because that really is pushing this forward to be, something and not just kind of a lot of indie projects unfortunately do get discarded, and this one does. Just I mean, it's a great story. It looks great. I mean, Jorge, you got such a your ability to like the perspective. Some of these panels that people will see as we watch the video are just incredible. The depth and the detail, and as a person who's like a doodler, I know how hard it is because I've tried these things where it's like, the simplest things you don't realize are so hard just to make it look like this person's here and this person's over here, and this is an arm, not a leg that's growing out of somebody's shoulder. It's all very difficult. So, Bert, let's rewind a little bit, I guess, and get back into the story idea then, because so you were a nurse. It was kind of a tough time to be a nurse. So you let's get us into the story and tell us a little bit about that. those character driven stories are so great, whether it's in comics or TV or anything, and whether they make the right choices or the wrong choices or a mixture. I do love that. That makes a story so much more enjoyable rather than just having it be like this person is perfect and we're just going to watch them beat people up, or this person is just evil and we're going to watch them be evil. Um, Jorge, how do you approach a project like this where there is that character driven element? There's um, a lot more depth, because I think that just like just like this is not written like your typical superhero book. It's also the art is very real. It feels like um, we were talking before we started recording about how the art just feels more real. So much comic book art these days feels like it's just like some computer. It's almost like realistic looking Pixar or something. So yeah, how do you approach this, and what's kind of like how's your style come into play when you're working on a project like this? That's cool. It and I guess I think what a lot of people who, since so many people are interested in writing a comic, and having one created. I feel like there's a lot more of us writers, or well, actual writers like Robert, and then wannabe writers like me. I'm one of those. I feel like 9 out of 10 people would like to say they'd written something. So I'm one of those people. But then there's the other like 1% that's actually done it. So when you do decide that you want to you want to take on a project like this, and you want to write a story like this, Robert, what is the kind of, how did you move forward on that? How did you take something that to me seems so overwhelming and huge, uh, to say that you're going to like write this story that has a beginning, middle, and an end? And not only that, but then you're going to go out there and find somebody who can bring it to life. How do you break that down, and how do you make that manageable? Well, about you, Jorge? How do you approach a comic book where you're, I mean, you've got this whole like every panel ends up being so many choices, like you mentioned, how does this room look? What's going to be in the background? What does a bathroom, what would this bathroom actually look like? And then also being able to tell the story the way that you do visually. How do you break that down? I mean, do you just approach it one panel at a time, or do you have to sort of think about that and do like some project management, or how do you approach that? And what about Bert on your, so like one thing that I feel like we kind of we didn't really dig very deep into this, but like I I think a lot of people, they, when things are kind of getting difficult, and the pandemic was difficult for so many people, but I think nurses were really kind of caught the brunt of a lot of it. How how do you how do you go out there and that's what your day to day is, and you somehow find the energy and the the drive to actually create something? Walk us through sort of the whatever what you were going through at that time, and how you were able to channel that into creation instead of just sitting on the couch watching TV. Yeah, I think it would be nice if we could all be a little more like that and turn our peeves into into being more productive. Um, well, so now that since we've rewound and we're now back in the past, let's stay back here in the past for a minute. And Jorge, tell us about tell us a little bit more about. You mentioned you got started when you were about well, you I guess started taking it seriously when you were about 14, and you mentioned Capullo and but what who are kind of some of your influences and has what drove you to become the artist that you are today? The classic. That's a pretty I I like those like heavy metal and sci-fi. I actually so it's the new Predator movie is PG-13, so this is not quite as extreme as Alien, but I watched the new Predator movie with my son, and uh, he's 8. I hope that he one day grows up and is really good at something and says, "Yeah, well, it all started when my dad watched Predator Badlands with me." But yeah, I think that that one of the things that I find so interesting about art, and whether it's making music or even just trying to like doodle or anything, is like the idea of influences and how they how they come out, even if it's maybe not really, maybe nobody else would know without you telling them, but it's just that they're in there, and I think that's really cool. Um, well, what is next? Tell me about tell me about what's next for Essential, Bert, and kind of like what where do people go if they want to know more and they want to read it? You did. Well, I hope it does go well because the I think that there's some good mainstream comics out there. Like I love the Absolute Comics, DC are so interesting, but overall, I don't find that the kind of stories that I want to read. You have to you have to have a strong, you have to have indie comic creators out there that are able to actually have a reason to do this. Because if you're going to write them and somebody's going to illustrate them, and then they're not going to go anywhere, well, people are going to get tired of writing them and illustrating them, and that would be terrible because so many of the best stories, and even so many of the best uh, comic writers and artists, are coming from the the indie world, and they're doing these great things, and then they come through and they're just like, oh, all of a sudden they're writing an absolute comic or something like that. So it's really important to support projects like these, and especially obviously I've read this one, so I know how good it is. So I'm hoping that people are going to get out there and back this. This is one of the panels that I was talking about earlier, Jorge. I think this is just, I can't quite describe what it is about. I mean, obviously, there's it just does a great job of visually showing what's going on, but the style of it, I can't. It's almost like Frank Miller esque, but it's got its own unique something. I don't know. I mean, what do you talk to me about this panel? And Bert, that's kind of like what you were talking about. Like you see it in your head, and so you're able to just sort of describe that in the way that you visualize it. And it's, I don't know. Have you always been pretty a visual thinker like that? It was going to be trust no matter what. Yeah, you could have handed it over to you could have handed it over to Frank Miller himself, and it would have actually with some of the stuff Frank Miller has drawn lately. I could you that maybe would actually require even more trust. But yeah, I know what you mean. I mean to have something in your head, and especially for somebody like you who, I mean, you so much of your artistic background is things where you had a lot more control. You were a chef, you know. You have a lot more that you're able to do. You know, you may work with other chefs, but and then music, you're able to a lot of times. You know, you have an audio engineering background to where so you can do everything with music. You know, you can do all the instruments, you can do the vocals, so you have absolute control. And now this was an opportunity for you. You wanted to get this book out there, but you had to basically you had to trust somebody else, or um, I mean, your doodle, your sketches. I saw where you were going with it, but I think that this is definitely an upgrade. Yeah. So right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so on the note of connection, where can people connect with you? Where, because I know that you're still on Substack, you've got the Kickstarter, and let's tell them even about. I mean, you are a man of many interests and talents. Tell them about your music also. Like, tell people where they can connect with you as an artist. Nice. Yeah, we'll put it in the. And Jorge, are you? Is it Jorclank? Is that where you are on Instagram? Okay. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to the Kickstarter, and I'm excited to see this book get finished. And I hope we could talk again about it some more, um, because it's great. And I loved the story when I just read it as a script, and it's incredible to see how just something come alive on the page with great art, like you did, Jorge. So thank you guys so much for being here. And everybody, look for the link to the Kickstarter and go support indie comic creators over there so we can keep getting great stories out there.